Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show. Hope you're having a great day. Here we come to you from the Citizens Bank studios. We continue to celebrate all the amazing people who are making Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Had a series of wonderful shows. I want to thank you for paying attention and listening. Thank you for the feedback. I was looking at the numbers this morning on Facebook, and the amount of engagement is great to see. People really like to be engaged in conversations about their home, about, what's happening here. One of the conversations that I had recently, as we have had some conversations in coastal Mississippi about some challenges in the seafood industry to be able to get all the sort of domestic seafood you need. There's going to be a need from time to time. In most cases, there are some cases this doesn't apply to, where you have to import seafood, and that's not bad that you do that. But the discussion was really around the full disclosure of that reality. I actually had my friend Chris Nelson, who I worked with over in Alabama, who headed up the seafood committee for the oil recovery efforts that I led for Governor Riley, on the show. He's the vice president of Bon Secour Fisheries, and we had a really good conversation. I got great feedback from that conversation. Incidentally, we're not hammering on the restaurants that were involved, the restaurant that was involved in this. We're not trying to create more pain for them as they recover from some not so good decisions along the way. But really is a focus on the challenges that restaurants have as it relates to that. And have had subsequent discussions with people like Robert St. John up in Hattiesburg, who has made a full commitment to domestic seafood, and I've had conversations with others like River Covington, for example, River Covington Jr. From Pasquashan. But really good conversations, and we'll continue to have those conversations. And I thought I would invite Chris to rejoin me today at the first half of the show. They're heavily involved in the oyster industry, and I wanted to kind of get an update from him about how things are going with his business. And once we get done with the oyster industry and whatever else he might want to talk about as it relates to seafood, I'm actually going to ask him about what does he think about the political situation in America today, because he's very well read and stays up on the issues as I do, and I look forward to visiting with him. So without any further ado, let me welcome Chris Nelson back to the Ricky Matthews Show. How you doing, Chris?
Doing well, Ricky. Thank you. Thanks for having me back. I always enjoy being on here. Always enjoy talking to you.
Well, it's a pleasure. Same here. So let's remind people who have not heard you and me talk before about where you're located and Bon Secour Fisheries and who you do business with and how big the region is that you do business with.
Love to be self-promotional. Appreciate that. We're down here, as you said earlier, about as far south in Alabama as you can get. Alabama's got a short coastline like Mississippi. We're down just inland of Gulf Shores on the Bon Secour River, which is on the eastern shore of Mobile Bay. And we've been here since the mid-1940s, and just across the river over towards Oyster Bay is where my great-grandfather started the business a long time ago. And we right now, we're more and more a distribution facility for seafood. We buy seafood, as much local seafood as we can get, and then when we can't get the local or regional seafood, we look for Pacific Coast or East Coast product, and then from there we go overseas. But the foundation and the roots of the business are in the local seafood industry. That's what my great-grandfather and grandfather built the business on, primarily in the oyster business. They were oyster planters here. At one time, Bon Secour Bay produced quite a number of oysters that were farmed in a very extensive fashion on bottom. They would dredge oysters from natural reefs up the bay and transplant them to bottom that they leased from the state. And that's really what built our business, both with oysters in the shell and oysters shucked in cans and distributed pretty far and wide, even back in the day, via Railway Express. And now we have refrigerated tractor trailers and refrigerated box trucks that we distribute the product with. And along with those oysters, we have our own brand of shrimp At one time, we had a large fleet of shrimp boats here. We no longer have the fleet, but we still have the brand, and we still get it packed for us to our specifications, and we're proud of that Bon Secour brand shrimp, and the brand of oysters is Nelson's brand Bon Secour oysters. So that's my my quick self-promotional talk.
Hey, let me tell you what I remember. You mentioned the shrimp boats. When I visited you during the oil recovery planning efforts, I was struck by a lot of things. First of all, when I pulled up, the beautiful oak trees and the setting of that place, it's a little bit almost out of you could see that setting in just about any movie. Even Bubba Gump, as you think about that. But yeah, it's beautiful. First of all, it's a little bit like going back in time. And of course, you mentioned the shrimp fleet, but I remember the number of shrimp boats that were tied up at your dock. As we walked through, what I remember is the shucking operation that you had in place and the number of people that were involved in shucking the oysters. You had a sense of freshness. Everything in here there's a lot of freshness about this place, and the seafood that's coming out of Bon Secour Fisheries is something you can rely on. And I remember you talking about the relationship you had with various oyster folks that from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, wherever you were getting your oysters from. And you were quite an aficionado. In fact, as you were talking about the oysters, it felt a little bit like talking about wine or talking about a cigar. You talked about it in very specific ways. They had unique tastes based on where you're getting your oysters from. But you grew up in that kind of environment, didn't you, Chris?
I did. I really can't remember a time when I wasn't, I didn't have the smell of seafood on me in some sense, which is a good thing. And growing up, eating oysters, understanding where they come from, how they're harvested, how they grow. And then I went on to study that in school and I got a degree in marine science. Because of my interest in the critters that if I can use that term, the critters that we harvest and bring to people's tables through the whole seafood supply chain. And it's a fascinating business. It is an extremely difficult business from time to time, as it is right now. But it is a fascinating business, and I think people tend to gravitate toward it because it has so much variety in it. It's not, I hate to say just a beef cow, and I'm sure you'll get a bunch of calls from your cattlemen that are listening. There's a lot to that industry. We tried to learn about beef not too long ago. It is tremendously complex as well, but we have so many different species that we handle. But of course, my favorite one is the Eastern oyster.
Yeah, I know you're passionate about it. Hey, one other thing I should have mentioned, because I have such a crystal clear memory about the visit that I made down there. But when you walk in the front door, to the left was where your offices are located. Mm-hmm. And then I remember, gosh, the family commitment. I mean, your whole family is engaged in that business, aren't they?
They were. They absolutely were. My mom and dad have passed. My mom would have passed by then. My dad passed about 3 years ago. And he was still very much involved, on a day-to-day basis, down there at least, when you were there. And my oldest brother, John, and then brother David and myself, we were all there. John has since retired, but David and I are still there. And there was, there's the family goes beyond just our immediate family to the families in the community, the local community, that have worked there. And there have been, at times there's been grandfathers, fathers, and grandsons working together in our business. And that's kind of neat too. And it comes with its own special set of considerations and challenges, but it's part of what has made the company successful as well, because people want to see, a business that their family is working in remain successful.
And so give me a sense of the geography of where you serve seafood too.
So I like to say we service the southeastern U.S. Now, we don't do a lot of business down in South Florida anymore, and up in the Carolinas and Virginia. Some people consider that the southeastern U.S. That's more mid-Atlantic. We don't do a lot up there anymore. But so Georgia, northern Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi. Not a lot in Louisiana, strangely enough, but a little bit in Texas as well. And then, of course, Alabama. We distribute with our own trucks and also have common carriers, people that are in the business of transporting food and sometimes particularly seafood, that can pick up from us and make deliveries far and wide. We have a customer in Colorado, for instance.
When we come back on the other side, we'll continue to have our conversation with Chris Nelson. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. When I think about this conversation that I'm having with Chris Nelson, the Vice President of Bon Secour Fisheries, I thank God I had the opportunity to do work in multiple states throughout my career because I gained so many wonderful friends, and Chris is one of them. Just terrific person. And it's great to have this show as a way of reconnecting in many ways. Hey, Chris, when I think about Bon Secour Fisheries, I remember my first impression of the name, incidentally. I think it's such a cool name. It makes a cool brand, doesn't it?
I take it for granted, of course, or not of course, but unfortunately, I guess I should say, but it is. Having a French, in our icon is the French chef. We call it the fat chef. I don't know if fat's probably not a politically correct word anymore, but we call it the fat chef. And he doesn't have a name, but that's how we refer to him. And that, connotes this French cooking and, back to your wine analogy, sort of people have become more food oriented, I think, and more interested in where their food comes from. So it has worked well in that environment, but it is a cool brand.
Well, we're communicating through Skype, so I can see you, and of course the folks on SuperTalk TV and YouTube and Facebook can all see that. I noticed your hat, your Gulf Fresh Seafood hat. Yep. One of the logos that came out of our oil recovery effort. I thought that was sort of a classic brand that they came up with. That's a good one, isn't it?
It is. This is the Alabama Gulf Seafood hat, and big communications up in Birmingham. My friend John Montgomery. Hey, John, if you listen to this, he and his team came up with this, and it is a great. It's like a merit badge off of a Boy Scout uniform kind of approach, and it became iconic with the recovery effort, particularly here in Alabama, but throughout the Gulf, and that was important to us. I can't say what we gained by that necessarily. What I can tell you is what we didn't lose, and it's kind of like being a bank guard. How many robberies did you stop? And so therefore it's a little harder to put your finger on the upside. But in my mind, the upside to that whole effort, and you played a big role in it, Ricky, and I appreciate it, was that we kept people's confidence that we had our eye on safety down here. We had our eye on not taking any chances with the seafood products that we would put on the market and that would wind up on people's plates and in people's mouths. And so the demand bounced back very quickly.
Yeah. Well, listen, John Montgomery at the time was doing some work for me in Mobile, and
that's right.
You'll remember this. I mean, he by the way, we recently reconnected, John and me, but he took the initiative. He took the initiative before we had it nailed down that we were going to have a seafood marketing committee or any of that stuff, or whether we were going to even be able to fund an effort to talk about this.
Pro bono.
Yes, it was incredible. And he said, "I'm going to do it, and if we end up getting the opportunity to place the ads at some point in the future, great. But we're going all in on this." Mm-hmm. And I was always very impressed with his tenaciousness on helping us move that forward.
You know, Ricky, it was an act of kindness. And if you think, you know, you were talking not too long ago about how that pays back. I mean, it really is. It maybe is overused term, but I find it to be true in my life. If you can show some kindness, it's the easiest and best investment you can make. It doesn't really cost you that much to be kind.
I was telling Ann the other day that I've reconnected with so many people through this show, and a couple I've had the opportunity to help with. One was doing an acquisition of a company, a product, and one was doing something else. And I helped them think it through. And they said, okay, well, you know, of course I'm going to pay you. And I said, no, that's okay. You don't need to. I'm just paying it forward. I find myself, I'm fortunate that I'm in a position now where I can do that. And it feels good to be able to connect with people, help friends, and learn from people like John Montgomery. It pays to pay it forward. So you know this from my time in Alabama, but man, the way I've always tried to lead is when I was in key roles, I never said no. I was always willing. And man, you know this. It meant that especially being the publisher of the newspaper, I got licked, man. But I got hit from all I was trying to do is be a convener and bring people together. But man, they found a fence. And
that also makes you a lightning rod too, doesn't it?
It does. But you know what? I never blinked, and you know it, man. I believe in it, and so I was always kind of a change agent in a way. But the negative never bothered me because I realized, I knew in my heart of hearts that the work that we were doing was just too important, and somebody had to do it. And since I had the opportunity to do it, that's what I was going to do. I was going to give it everything I got, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
So you mentioned business is a little challenging right now, but how is it challenging?
The restaurant trade is, I think, reacting to a contraction in its business across the country, maybe across the world. I don't know. It exploded coming out of COVID, and then there were all these supply chain. Of course, was a big issue with just getting the product to the restaurant so they could serve it, but they also had trouble getting people to come back to work. And so they bid up the price of the wages for the labor. And that's been a big part of this inflationary spiral that I think we've all been trying to whistle past the graveyard, so to speak, on that. It is real. And there is inflation, particularly when you go out to eat. Anybody that's been out to eat lately, you know, whether it's at McDonald's or at Mary Mahoney's, they're seeing higher and higher prices. And it is due to the fact that there was this surge in demand, and now it's backing away. And so trying to work with the restaurants to find ways to control costs and still serve a product that they can be proud of and that their clientele will enjoy and appreciate, that's a challenge. But that's what we do now, is we work with restaurants to find the right products at the right price at the right time, is kind of the tagline we're using now, that put the product on the plate at a cost that the clientele can afford, and still have an excellent meal and appreciate where it came from even.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I had a conversation just this morning with a local restaurant entrepreneur that has multiple locations in Mississippi, but in other states as well. And she told me that their biggest issue still lingering from the COVID is food cost. Mm-hmm. And labor cost, and not just labor costs, getting labor. You know, there's constant turnover. I hear it from all restaurants. You add to that the inflationary pressures that are on people, and then the fact that all the money that came out of COVID that kind of spurred the economy along, all that money's gone and dried up now. Mm-hmm. It's just challenging. You know, I'm not saying they're doing business, but but is really a challenge, especially a challenge as they think about expanding or trying to grow their business. It's not easy.
COVID was an unnatural pebble that splashed in the big pond, and the ripples are still, coming back around, and it's going to take a long time for it to settle down.
And a lot of the money that we put out there for infrastructure and whatever, my read on it is it didn't do what we wanted it to do, and it was so much money.
There's so many unintended consequences, as they always are. The law of unintended consequences is like
long-term inflationary pressures, the debt. I mean, the debt number that I looked at the other day, my God.
$35 trillion. $35 trillion. I don't even know what that is, Rick.
I don't either. I don't either.
Are there 35 trillion stars in the sky? I don't.
Well, hey, listen, we got a short period of time left, so we don't have time to get into the political situation. Sure. But I am curious about, what do you think has to happen on the national scale that's going to change things for people that are in your business?
Oh, gosh. I think that there's going to have to be a realization that whatever you do from a regulatory standpoint, that it's got to be, I hate to use such a simple term as a good reason, but something that's going to add value to the end product. And so much of what we've done in the last 20 years, really, Ricky, is just for show. It's the virtue signal. This is going to look good, but the end product for the consumer has not improved.
Yeah,
what we've got to get back to is.
I hear the Chevron case recently is going to bring a lot of that into focus, and hopefully we can get on that. But hey, listen, I'll have you back soon, and we'll continue the conversation.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate
it. You bet, my friend. This has been Chris Nelson from Bon Secour Fisheries. We'll see you after this break.